All right, so big news out of Japan between the fights of Takashi Uchiyama versus Jezreel Corrales, Ryoichi Taguchi versus Juan Jose Landeta, and Koei Kono versus Intanon Sichapmuang. The broadcast overall did incredible numbers. The average figure was 3.3 million viewers for this card. 3.3 million. That's over twice as many as what Gennady Golovkin just drew on HBO on the free HBO weekend as well. I mean, this is showing you that boxing is an international sport. You know, a lot of these countries from around the world. You know what? Let me get to the main figure too. For the main event, Uchiyama versus Corrales, the number went from 3.3 million viewers to 4.3 million viewers. So the peak was 4.3 million, average was 3.3 million. So that means that Taguchi and Kono got some excellent numbers, but Uchiyama basically put it over the top. You know, being a long-standing champion, a guy that had I guess some issues at the end of training camp, considering the fact that the odds went from 15-1 down to 5-1 in the last couple of weeks before this fight. But regardless, man, this just shows that boxing is an international sport. It's a worldwide sport. Some of these guys from some of these countries that you may not pay attention to boxing in these countries may just be, superstars in their countries, and they may bring big time bucks, big time money, six and seven figures for these fights. I know Kazuto Ioka does. Of course, Zhou Shiming did without even having very many fights and without even being the champion. These guys in Japan at least have world championships to back their ratings, and the ratings basically come upon when a guy is either challenging for or successfully becomes a world champion. So I mean, just excellent numbers from these guys. Let's see, they're just worldwide. Boxing is a worldwide sport. You have fighters from Thailand that are national heroes, fighters from Japan that are national heroes, fighters from Nicaragua that are national heroes, fighters from Ghana that are national heroes. A lot of people forget that Joseph Agbeko became a fucking superstar celebrity when he first won his bantamweight title. And then when he entered the bantamweight tournament in Showtime, he basically had the full blessing of all the Ghanaian people, the president, so on and so forth. And that goes back to Ike Quarte was a celebrity there, as well as Azuma Nelson. I mean, just these guys from a lot of these countries that don't necessarily have big time multinational corporate pro sports teams the way the NBA, the NFL, the NHL, the MLB, and then other sports aside from professional football, soccer. Boxing is basically the number two sport by and large in a lot of these countries. Or if it's not the number two sport, any of the fighters that become world champions in this sport of boxing become overnight some of the biggest celebrities, depending on where they happen to be from. Byron Rojas of Nicaragua, a stablemate of Chocolatito Gonzalez, pulled a 25-1 upset against Heki Butler of South Africa in South Africa. 25-1 upset. He returned to Nicaragua to just huge fanfare. I mean, I'd say Gonzalez has a lot to do with that because he kind of busted open the doors, being one of the first big time fighters there in Nicaragua since Ricardo Mayorga and Alexis Arguello. And so, now, even though Gonzalez didn't have the same kind of fanfare initially when he won his first title, he kind of grew it over time. Byron Rojas basically had it, almost instantaneously, essentially, upon dethroning Heki Butler, the clear number one fighter at the 105-pound division. It goes the same for a lot of these guys from a lot of these different countries. Samuel Peter was upon the precipice of being a big timer. Potentially he could have brought the heavyweight title back to Nigeria and had some big fights there, but he had a couple of missteps in what were his biggest opportunities, essentially, mainly against the Klitschko brothers. But be that as it may, a lot of fighters around the world, and there's really more to come. I mean, there's been a lot of fighters, of course, coming from different countries in Eastern Europe that have burst onto the scene. Of course, you have people like Golovkin from Kazakhstan. You have Vijender Singh from India, who's starting to make waves. Even Amir Khan mentioned Vijender Singh. That shows you how big of a deal, I guess, Singh has become in India and for, I guess, the Indian diaspora, considering he's fought in the UK recently. And also, he won his gold medal in the UK Olympics funny enough. So that definitely helped him. Plenty of fighters from South America become big time celebrities. Acelino Freitas from Brazil. Brazil's not even traditionally known as a powerhouse in boxing outside of Eder Joffre, but Acelino Freitas would bring the house down every single time he fought. His fight with Jorge Barrios of Argentina probably had one of the most raucous crowds you could imagine. I think that fight was in Orlando, Florida. Perfect fight. Perfect place to hold that fight. Plenty of Brazilian and Argentine fight fans there. But I mean, it just goes to show that boxing, in spite of the fact that it's considered, a fringe or a niche sport in the United States, it's plenty big in the United Kingdom. They're the number of world champions, and the fact that these guys are getting heavy paydays to fight guys that aren't even necessarily at the world championship level, but are still challenging for world titles, should show you that. The likes of the guys that Scott Quigg has fought recently, the guys that Carl Frampton fought recently, the guys that Kell Brook has fought recently, for instance. Anthony Joshua is kind of playing that a little bit right now with the Dominic Brazil fight. Although Brazil's he's an all right opponent. He definitely could have done a lot worse. Kell Brook certainly did. But I mean, it just goes to show that outside of the United States, huge sport still. Juan Francisco Estrada versus Giovanni Segura. The two guys from places that ain't Mexico City. Segura's from Tijuana, and Estrada's from Hermosillo. The two of them fought in Mexico City, packed the house in Mexico City, and brought in, I think it was 30 million viewers for that fight. It was something just insane in Mexico for that fight. Estrada's a huge star in Mexico. Of course, Mexico has a very deep background of big time fighters, big star fighters, going back several decades upon decades. So I mean that's not as big of a surprise, but even still, just the fact that he's able to draw such huge ratings there, in spite of the fact that he doesn't have the big United States international push, just goes to show how big of a sport worldwide it is in each and every country. You could find examples of guys bringing big time ratings, big time purses, and forcing guys that are even burgeoning stars in their own country to actually travel in order to try and win those titles in countries that are completely foreign to them. I mean, shit, just the fact that the Valoria versus Estrada fight was in Macau, China, in spite of the fact that Brian Valoria is Hawaiian American and Juan Francisco Estrada is Mexican, fighting over in China on a Zhou Shiming card. I mean, just shows you that sometimes, the money worldwide can make a big difference for, where these fights happen and which fighters become stars and, how it plays about. But it's excellent to see these fighters getting these big numbers, these big paydays. These guys put their lives on the line for us each and every time they go out there. So it's always great to see, success. It's always great to see success for boxing. As far as I'm concerned, a rising tide raises all ships. If it's just one or two boxers doing the big ratings, that doesn't help the sport as a whole. But when it's a dozen or 24 fighters doing big ratings, not only in their home towns but in their home countries, but worldwide, and the whole nine of it. I mean, to me, that just increases the amount of money that's out there for these fighters, and they deserve every penny of it. When you got guys that are bench warmers in some of these other professional sports getting paid millions of dollars a year to basically be part of the practice squad, and you got guys in there putting their lives on the line, potentially being permanently injured from this sport, it's great to see them get paid the money that they truly deserve. These are the modern day gladiators, the modern day warriors, and it's excellent to see, man. So I hope that we continue to get big time numbers from each and every single fight that's out there. We got plenty of fights on the horizon coming up on the major networks, and I hope for all the fighters' sake and for the sport's sake as a whole that we continue to get big ratings. I hope that more fans in the United States open their eyes and ears and their hearts, to boxing itself, to boxing worldwide, to all these different fighters who may just be hidden gems that they've never heard of, but are amazing fighters nonetheless. A lot of people didn't realize how amazing of a fighter that Manny Pacquiao once was when he burst on the scene and destroyed Lelo Ledwaba, and then continued on his winning ways with Barrera. A lot of people didn't know that Marquez was a hidden gem. Marquez, even from the hotbed of Mexican boxing, would become as amazing a fighter as he would eventually become. A lot of people considered him just, a lackluster boxer, but he turned out to become one of the all-time great legends of the sport, which probably nobody would have predicted back in the mid to late 90s when he was first became a world champion, in the Forum boxing days of the Great Western Forum in Los Angeles. So that's pretty much it. That's my whole thing with regard to the ratings. Love the sport of boxing, and I love to see boxers getting it in and getting paid. These guys deserve every bit of it, and in their post-retirement, they deserve to be able to at least lead a life without financial issues. Should they, at least have the opportunity to be able to have enough money in order to invest properly and last them the rest of their lives. So that's what it is, and that's how hopefully it's gonna be. Boxing is the shit, and I hope that everybody gets paid, and that's pretty much it for this. Peace.